There are stories in Hollywood that fade over time, and then there are the ones that return years later, heavier, darker, and impossible to ignore. At 62, Demi Moore is finally speaking with a clarity she never had in her 20s, 30s, or even 40s. For the first time, she is revealing what truly happened behind the closed doors of her marriage to Ashton Kutcher. The secrets she carried, the pain she hid, and the truth she tried to protect for far too long. What she kept silent for nearly 2 decades has now become the confession that is reshaping everything we thought we knew about their love story. The beginning of a love that looked like a miracle. When Demi Moore met Ashton Kutcher in May 2003, she was 40 years old and still piecing together the shattered remains of her divorce from Bruce Willis. Ashton, just 25 at the time, entered her life with a kind of warmth and charm she hadn't felt in years. He listened, he admired, he adored. At least that's how it seemed. Their first long conversation lasted 8 hours. An instant emotional bond that made Demi believe she had found someone who accepted not just her fame, but her broken parts, too. In a matter of weeks, Ashton met her daughters and even Bruce Willis, something nearly unheard of in Hollywood ex-spouse dynamics. By the time they married on September 24, 2005, the world had already labeled them the perfect example of a modern fairy tale. They blended families, built a production company together, and publicly praised one another as if their relationship had rewritten the rules of love. But behind that image, a private tragedy had already begun. Just 2 years before their wedding, Demi had suffered a devastating miscarriage at 6 months pregnant. They had already chosen a name, Chaplain Ray. The loss shook them to the core. Demi blamed herself. She had been sober for nearly 20 years, but she admitted in later interviews that she had occasionally smoked and drank early in the pregnancy, and she never stopped wondering if she caused the death of her own child. That guilt became an invisible wall between them, even as they tried IVF, fertility treatments, and adoption. Ashton said the loss made him realize he was ready for fatherhood. But Demi felt it pushed her into a place of emotional darkness she had never experienced before. This tragedy was the first crack in their marriage, a wound neither of them knew how to heal. And as time would prove, the heartbreak wasn't the darkest secret she would have to carry for him. The price she paid to keep their marriage alive. The miscarriage left Demi Moore in a fragile, vulnerable place, and instead of healing, she began slipping into old patterns she had fought so hard to escape. After nearly 2 decades of sobriety, she relapsed. What began as a drink during moments of grief turned into a slow collapse. Alcohol, prescription pills, and self-blame that hollowed her from the inside out. Ashton tried to comfort her at first, but over time, he grew distant in ways she didn't fully understand. The young man who once felt like her savior now felt unreachable. Desperate to save their marriage, Demi began doing anything she thought would make him stay. In her 2019 memoir, Inside Out, she revealed one of the deepest wounds she had carried for years. Ashton had asked for threesomes, and she agreed, believing that giving him what he wanted would fix the distance between them. Instead, every compromise left her feeling smaller, emptier, and more disconnected from herself. She later admitted that these decisions left her ashamed, confused, and questioning her own worth. The tension between them escalated as Ashton leaned more heavily into the idea that their marriage should be open-minded and modern, while Demi felt she was losing her identity. Her attempts to be everything he wanted slowly erased the woman she once was. And as she began spiraling into addiction, Ashton pulled further away, a pattern that only deepened her fear that she was no longer enough. Behind closed doors, the emotional distance began to feel like a silent storm. Ashton traveled more, stayed out later, and began living like a man who no longer felt bound to his vows. Demi sensed it. The late-night absences, the excuses, the growing coldness in his voice. It all hinted at a truth she wasn't ready to face. Her daughters began to worry, watching their mother shrink under the weight of fear, guilt, and emotional abandonment. What had once been a home full of blended family laughter slowly turned into a space of tension and unspoken pain. But the darkest blow was still waiting for her, and when it arrived, it shattered what little remained of her strength. The betrayal that broke everything. By 2011, 6 years into their marriage, Demi Moore was holding on by a thread. She was still trying to present a united front for the public, still pretending that the home behind the smiles was stable, loving, and whole. But her world collapsed on September 24th, 2011, the day that should have been their 6th wedding anniversary. Instead of celebrating their life together, Demi woke up to a nightmare she never expected. A Google alert on her phone revealed that Ashton Kutcher had spent the night with a 22-year-old woman named Sarah Leal. The news hit her like a physical blow. What made it even worse was that Demi had seen the girl before. Bold enough to hand Ashton her phone number at a bowling alley in front of Demi and her daughter. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. And Ashton's confession made it undeniable. He had cheated. But the darkest part of this moment wasn't the affair itself, it was the excuse Ashton gave afterward. He told her that the threesomes she had agreed to earlier in their marriage had blurred the lines, as if her attempt to make him happy, to keep him, to bend herself into whatever shape he needed, had somehow justified the betrayal. For Demi, those words cut deeper than the cheating itself. They turned her sacrifices into blame. And this wasn't the only affair. She later learned about another woman, 21-year-old Brittany Jones, an earlier infidelity she hadn't fully understood at the time. Ashton had been drifting away long before she realized the distance was permanent. Just days after the scandal broke, Demi was forced to stand beside Ashton at an anti-trafficking charity event, pretending everything was fine. Inside, she was breaking. The public didn't see the shaking hands backstage, the panic she tried to hide, or the way she struggled to breathe under the pressure of maintaining a lie she could no longer bear. On November 17, 2011, she finally announced their separation. She said she needed to stay true to her values, words that were simple on the surface, but underneath carried the weight of a woman who had been pushed past her limits. What followed next was not healing. It was the darkest descent of her life, one that nearly ended everything. The collapse and the years she disappeared. The end of her marriage didn't bring Demi Moore relief. It brought devastation. After nearly 20 years of sobriety, she had already begun slipping during the marriage, but the betrayal and public humiliation pushed her into a full collapse. On January 23, 2012, that collapse became impossible to hide. Demi suffered a seizure during a party at her Benedict Canyon home, brought on by a dangerous mix of synthetic cannabis, nitrous oxide, and weeks of starvation-level dieting. Guests watched in shock as she convulsed on the floor, and the 911 call that followed marked the beginning of the darkest years of her life. In the months that followed, Demi's addiction deepened. She took up to a dozen Vicodin pills a day, chased with vodka and energy drinks. She became obsessed with losing weight, staring at herself in the mirror for hours, convinced she needed to be thinner, smaller, invisible. Her weight dropped to around 102 pounds. The combination of exhaustion, malnutrition, and drugs triggered more seizures and terrifying health scares. She withdrew from public life completely, disappearing from events, skipping press appearances, and avoiding everyone she loved. The collapse didn't just affect her, it destroyed her relationship with her daughters. Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah described those years as terrifying. They didn't recognize the woman Demi had become. She spoke differently, moved differently, and acted like someone who wasn't fully present. Tallulah later said her mother felt like a monster, not out of cruelty, but out of how drastically addiction had changed her. The pain became so overwhelming that the girls distanced themselves for their own safety. In 2012, they cut off contact. None of them attended Demi's 50th birthday. She missed Rumor's milestones, Scout's achievements, and the everyday moments that once bonded them. The silence between them stretched for nearly 3 years. Finally, in September 2012, Demi entered Cirque Lodge in Utah, a luxury rehab costing $150,000 a month. But even that didn't repair the relationships. Healing wouldn't begin until 2015, when Tallulah, freshly out of rehab herself, reached out to her mother for the first time in years. But even as Demi fought her way back to life, another truth about Ashton, a truth she had protected for years, would resurface and reshape everything we thought we knew about their marriage. The truth she never wanted to say out loud. As Demi slowly rebuilt her life after 2015, she did something she hadn't done in years. She began to speak honestly. Therapy, rehabilitation, and the long, painful process of reconnecting with her daughters forced her to confront memories she had buried under addiction, grief, and fear. And as she opened up in family counseling, then in interviews, and eventually in her 2019 memoir, Inside Out, one truth kept resurfacing. The truth she had spent more than a decade protecting. It wasn't just that Ashton Kutcher had cheated. It wasn't just the threesomes, the excuses, or the emotional distance. It was something deeper, something that shaped every decision she made during those years. Demi felt she had been manipulated into believing she wasn't enough, not young enough, not wild enough, not modern enough to keep the man she loved. In her memoir, she revealed that Ashton often made comments about their age difference, joking in ways that didn't feel like jokes. He told her that monogamy wasn't practical, subtly encouraging her to lower her boundaries. Demi admitted she accepted things she never would have accepted earlier in her life, not because she wanted them, but because she feared losing him. This emotional erosion became the darkest secret of their marriage. Demi hid how deeply she was compromising herself, piece by piece, until she barely recognized the woman she had become. The miscarriage haunted her for years, and she revealed that Ashton didn't fully understand her grief, a distance that made her blame herself even more. She confessed that she believed their lost child was her failure, a burden she carried silently while Ashton moved forward, traveling, working, living freely. Even after the separation, Demi kept quiet about his behavior. She didn't speak about the cheating. She didn't speak about the threesomes. She didn't speak about the emotional manipulation. She tried to protect him, protect his image, protect the years they shared. It wasn't until she turned 56, and later, at 62, that she finally let herself say the things she had kept buried. Not to destroy him, not to expose him, but to reclaim the parts of herself she had lost. Her confession wasn't about revenge. It was about truth and healing after years of silence. Peace, forgiveness, and the final reveal at 62. By the time Demi Moore reached her early 60s, everything about her life had changed, not just her career or her relationships, but the way she understood herself. After years of silence, she realized that telling the truth wasn't about exposing Ashton Kutcher. It was about freeing the version of herself she had abandoned along the way. And as surprising as it seemed, healing didn't come from anger. It came from clarity. In 2020, Ashton publicly said there was no badness between them and that he loved and respected Demi's daughters. He admitted that divorce made him feel like a failure, especially after the miscarriage they had endured together. His words didn't erase the past, but they revealed something important. Neither of them had walked away from the marriage without wounds. The fallout had shaped them both. In 2022, Demi took another unexpected step toward healing when she appeared alongside Mila Kunis, Ashton's wife, in a Super Bowl commercial. Instead of resentment, the moment was marked by humor and maturity. The two women joked about their shared past, showing the world that moving forward was possible without bitterness. And behind the scenes, Demi and Mila built an unlikely friendship, even starting a book club together. Then came 2025, the year Demi finally spoke openly about the darkest parts of her relationship with Ashton. Not just the cheating or the threesomes, but the emotional self-erasure she had lived through. She described how she had slowly given up her boundaries, her self-worth, and even her voice, all in an attempt to keep a man who was never meant to complete her. This, she revealed, was the real secret she had carried. She had lost herself long before she lost her marriage. But this time she shared the truth from a place of strength, not sorrow. She had rebuilt her bond with her daughters. She had healed old wounds. She had learned to love herself again, embracing what she called solo partnering, a commitment to being whole without relying on another person to fill the emptiness. At 62, Demi Moore didn't just reveal Ashton Kutcher's darkest secret, she revealed her own. That silence had cost her more than heartbreak, and speaking out was the final step toward reclaiming her life. Demi Moore's journey reminds us that even the strongest people can lose themselves in love, and still find the courage to rise again. What do you think was the most painful moment in her story? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Hollywood stories.